The morning chimes of Zephyria Prime's twin suns always reminded Elena of a cosmic doorbell, if doorbells could harmonize in frequencies that made your teeth ache and your sinuses vibrate like tuning forks. She pulled the biosilk covers over her head, a futile gesture since the palace's ambient lighting system had already begun its slow transition from the deep purples of Etherean night to the golden amber of dawn. "Good morning, Dr. Vasquez," chirped the wall in perfectly accented English, though the Etherean accent made it sound more like, "Good morning, Dr. Vasquez." Even after 2 years, she couldn't get used to talking furniture. "Coffee," Elena mumbled into her pillow. "I'm sorry, but as we discussed yesterday, and the day before, and approximately 730 previous days, coffee beans are not indigenous to Zephyria Prime. Might I suggest the stimulating algae brew that approximates your earth beverage?" Elena sat up, her hair defying gravity in ways that would have made Einstein weep. "That green sludge tastes like pond water mixed with regret. Your colorful descriptions of our cuisine continue to fascinate the kitchen staff. Cook Thelavar has begun collecting your metaphors. Yesterday's tastes like a swamp married a vitamin tablet has become quite popular." She laughed despite herself. Living in an alien palace had its perks. Unlimited entertainment came from traumatizing the staff with Earth idioms. The walls here were more conversational than most humans she'd known back home. The floor beneath her feet warmed automatically as she padded to the observation deck, a jutting crystal platform that offered a panoramic view of the city below. Zephyria Prime stretched endlessly in organic curves and spiraling towers that pulsed with bioluminescent veins. No harsh angles or straight lines, the Etherians built like they lived, in flowing harmony with their environment. Sometimes Elena felt like she was residing inside a massive, beautiful organism rather than a building. 3 Etherian courtiers glided past on the skyway below, their elongated ears catching the morning light like sails. Their ears always gave them away, pointed tips that twitched with every emotion, flushing various shades when they were excited, embarrassed, or aroused. Elena had learned to read Etherian moods better than most of their own kind, simply because humans were apparently the galaxy's worst poker players. Her rounded ears revealed nothing, which either made her mysterious or deeply suspicious, depending on who was asking. "The celestial convergence preparations are proceeding smoothly," the wall informed her. "Your presence is requested at this morning's protocol briefing." Elena groaned. The convergence, a once-in-a-decade celebration when Zephyria Prime's 3 moons aligned perfectly, was only days away. For the Etherians, it meant spiritual renewal and cosmic harmony. For Elena, it meant being paraded around like a prize poodle for visiting dignitaries from across the galaxy. "Let me guess," she said, pulling on her designated, cultural representative robes, which made her look like a cross between a monk and a very expensive curtain. "More requests for me to demonstrate primitive human behaviors for the entertainment of beings who think I'm one evolutionary step above a houseplant?" Actually, the requests have become quite sophisticated. Ambassador Krelthos from the Andorian Collective would like you to explain human mating rituals. Specifically, something called Netflix and Chill, which apparently confused their cultural analysts for months. Elena nearly choked on her algae brew. "Oh, for the love of, who's been feeding them Earth slang? Your predecessor, Dr. Marcus Chen, left quite an extensive database of human colloquialisms. The Etherians have been studying them with the intensity of religious scholars examining sacred texts." She made a mental note to have strong words with Chen if she ever made it back to Earth. The man had apparently treated first contact like an opportunity to punk an entire alien civilization. The briefing chamber buzzed with activity as palace staff prepared for the influx of galactic dignitaries. Elena slipped inside, trying to remain inconspicuous, which was about as effective as a giraffe attempting hide-and-seek. Every Etherian head turned her way, ears perking up with curiosity and barely concealed amusement. "Ah, Dr. Vasquez," came the melodious voice of Vextelone, the chief palace administrator. His ears were particularly long and elegant, marking him as high-ranking nobility, though Elena privately thought they made him look like a very dignified bat. "We were just discussing your role in the welcome ceremonies." "Let me guess, Elena said, settling into her chair, which immediately molded itself to her body shape with uncomfortable intimacy. More cultural demonstrations. Should I practice my primitive human eating habits or perhaps my quaint bipedal locomotion? Several Etherians' ears flushed pale blue, their equivalent of polite laughter. Vextellone's ears remained a neutral silver, never a good sign. The Corvin delegation has expressed particular interest in your species, he said, his tone carefully neutral. They're fascinated by human adaptability and resilience. Elena's stomach dropped. The Corvins were known throughout the galaxy for their collection of interesting specimens. Their idea of cultural exchange typically involved specimen jars and very detailed dissection notes. How wonderfully scientific of them, she managed, hoping her voice didn't betray her sudden terror. I assume they'll want to observe me from a safe distance. Perhaps through reinforced glass. Their requests are still being processed through diplomatic channels, Vextellone replied, which in Etherian bureaucracy speak meant we're trying to figure out how to refuse without starting an interstellar incident. As the briefing droned on about seating arrangements and dietary requirements for beings who breathe methane, Elena's mind wandered to her secret refuge. Hidden in her quarters, tucked away in a sealed compartment she'd discovered months ago, lay her most precious possessions, paper and pencils smuggled from her original supplies. In a civilization where art was created through bioneural interfaces that directly translated thought into light sculptures and sonic paintings, the simple act of moving graphite across paper was revolutionary, or primitive, depending on your perspective. The Etherians created beauty by thinking it into existence, their neural implants interfacing with the biotech that permeated their architecture. Elena's art required nothing but her hands, her eyes, and the patient accumulation of countless tiny marks. It was meditation and rebellion wrapped in the simple act of drawing. After the briefing, she made her way back to her quarters, nodding politely to the various palace staff who bowed as she passed. Being a diplomatic guest meant living in a gilded cage where every comfort was provided except the one thing she wanted most, the choice to leave. Her chambers were vast by human standards, though she'd learned that Etherians considered them quite modest. The walls shifted color with her biorhythms, currently displaying soft greens that suggested the room was trying to be supportive. Sometimes Elena wondered if the palace was actually a massive, benevolent organism that had adopted her like a stray cat. She sealed the door, one of the few privacy privileges she'd negotiated, and retrieved her hidden art supplies. The paper felt rough and real beneath her fingers, a tactile sensation that bioneural interfaces could never replicate. She settled by the window where the morning light painted everything in warm gold and began to sketch. The twin suns of Zephyria Prime created constantly shifting shadows as they moved across the sky, and Elena found herself attempting to capture the way light played across the organic architecture of the city. Her hand moved in practiced strokes, building up layers of shading that gave depth and dimension to the flowing lines of Etherian design. This was her meditation, her rebellion, her connection to humanity in a world where she often felt more like a curiosity than a person. Each line was a small act of defiance against the assumption that newer was always better, that progress meant abandoning the simple joys of creation through touch and time. The sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor made her freeze, pencil hovering above the paper. If anyone discovered her primitive art supplies, it would cause a diplomatic incident of epic proportions. The Etherians would be scandalized by her rejection of their advanced creative technologies, and she'd probably end up explaining to a committee why humans insisted on making marks on dead trees instead of simply thinking beautiful thoughts into existence. She held her breath, listening as the footsteps passed by her door and continued down the corridor. False alarm. Elena returned to her sketch, adding detail to the spiraling towers that stretched towards Zephyria Prime's lavender sky, unaware that in just moments, her carefully guarded secret was about to be discovered by the most curious pair of ears in the palace. Kirithes had always been cursed with ears that were just a little too large for proper Etherian etiquette. While other palace staff could maintain the subtle ear positions that indicated respectful attention, hers had a tendency to swivel toward interesting sounds like furry radar dishes with abandonment issues. This morning, They were practically vibrating with nervous energy as she balanced a tray of cleaning supplies that seemed determined to achieve sentience and escape. "Focus, Kira," she muttered to herself, using the human phrase she'd picked up from observing Dr. Vasquez. The other staff had started incorporating human expressions into their vocabulary, treating them like exotic spices that made conversations more flavorful. Yesterday, she'd heard Cook Thelavar describe a failed souffle as totally bogus, which had sent the kitchen into fits of confused laughter. The bioluminescent corridors pulsed gently with the palace's morning rhythm, walls shifting from deep purple to warm amber as the twin suns climbed higher. Kirithess loved this time of day when the palace felt most alive, its organic architecture breathing and humming with contentment. Sometimes she imagined the entire structure was actually a massive, benevolent creature that had decided to moonlight as a royal residence. Her assignment today was Dr. Vasquez's quarters, a task that usually fell to senior staff, but the celestial convergence preparations had everyone scrambling. Kirithess didn't mind, she was fascinated by the human and her strange, emotionally opaque ears that never revealed anything. Among a people who communicated half their thoughts through ear position and color, Elena Vasquez was like a walking mystery novel. Probably off doing her morning garden meditation, Kirithess said to her cleaning supplies, which included a bio-scrubber that looked suspiciously like an overgrown sea anemone. Humans are so predictable with their routines. She approached Elena's door, noting the privacy seal was active, unusual for morning hours. Most palace residents left their quarters open during daylight, allowing the building's atmospheric systems to flow freely. Kirithess paused, her oversized ears twitching with uncertainty. Protocol dictated she should return later, but the convergence preparations meant her schedule was packed tighter than a Corvin supply capsule. The door recognized her bio-signature and admitted her with a soft musical chime. Kirithess stepped inside, expecting to find empty rooms that needed only light tidying. Instead, she found herself frozen in the entrance, staring at something that made absolutely no sense. Dar. Vasquez sat by the window, completely motionless except for her right hand, which moved in small, precise gestures over a white surface. In her fingers, she held what appeared to be a thin stick, and wherever the stick touched the white material, dark marks appeared. The human was creating images without any visible technology, no neural interface crown, no bio-stylus, no thought projection matrix. Kirithess's ears flushed bright orange with shock. This was impossible. Creation required technology, the marriage of mind and machine that allowed thoughts to become reality. Yet here was Elena, somehow transferring images directly from her mind to matter using nothing but a primitive tool and the movement of her hand. The scene unfolding before her was unlike anything in Etherian experience. Elena's face held an expression of deep concentration, her mysterious human ears remaining their usual neutral position. She was creating what appeared to be the palace itself. The flowing lines and organic curves rendered in countless tiny marks that somehow combined to form a recognizable image. What in the name of the three moons? Kirithess whispered, then immediately clapped a hand over her mouth. Elena's head snapped up, her dark eyes wide with what could only be terror. The primitive creation tool, a pencil, though Kirithess had no name for it, fell from her fingers and rolled across the floor with a sound like tiny thunder. I can explain, Elena said quickly, her hands moving to cover the white surface. It's not what it looks like. Kirithess's ears cycled through several colors, orange shock, purple confusion, and finally settling on pale blue curiosity. What is it that it looks like? Because from here, it looks like you're performing magic. Magic? Elena laughed, a sound that was part relief and part hysteria. Trust me, if I could do magic, I'd have conjured myself a way home by now. And possibly a decent cup of coffee. But you're creating images without technology, Kirithess said, stepping closer despite every instinct telling her to flee. How is that possible? Are you channeling some kind of human neural energy through that stick? Elena looked down at her pencil, then back at Kirithess. You really don't know what drawing is, do you? Drawing? Kirithess tested the word, her ears perking up with interest. Is that the name of your human creation magic? It's not magic, it's just. Elena paused, clearly struggling to explain something so fundamental she'd never had to think about it before. It's making marks on paper to represent things you see or imagine. The pencil, this stick, contains graphite that leaves traces when you drag it across a surface. Kirithess crept closer, her cleaning supplies forgotten. The image Elena had been creating showed remarkable detail. The curved walls of the palace, the way morning light played across the bioluminescent surfaces, even the small garden visible through the window. But it was all made of tiny lines and smudges, built up layer by layer like sedimentary rock of creativity. Your people don't draw? Elena asked, watching Kirithess examine the sketch with the intensity of a scientist studying an alien artifact. We think our art into existence, Kirithess explained, her ears flushing deeper blue with excitement. Neural interfaces translate imagination directly into light, sound, or biosculptural forms. But this is like watching creation happen in slow motion. Every mark is a decision, every line a choice made visible. Elena blinked. You know, I've never thought about it that way. How long does it take? Kirithess asked, reaching toward the paper then pulling her hand back. To make one image. This one? About an hour so far. But I'm not finished. Kirithess's ears went completely flat against her head, the Etherean equivalent of a jaw drop. An hour? For one image. Our artists can create entire symphonies of light in minutes. But can they enjoy the process? Elena asked, picking up her pencil again. Half the point isn't the finished product, it's the meditation of making it. The way your mind has to really see something to reproduce it. The happy accidents when a line goes wrong but creates something better. Happy accidents, Kirithess repeated, savoring the phrase. We have algorithms to prevent those. And there's your problem right there, Elena said with a grin. Sometimes the best discoveries come from things going wrong. They stared at each other for a moment, both realizing they were sharing something forbidden. Elena's primitive art would be considered a rejection of Etherean culture, while Kirithess's fascination with it was certainly not appropriate for a junior palace attendant. I should report this, Kirithess said quietly, though her ears had turned a soft pink that suggested she had no intention of doing so. Probably, Elena agreed. I'm pretty sure keeping ancient human art supplies counts as smuggling primitive technology. Ancient? How old is this drawing? Oh, only about 40,000 years or so. Give or take a few millennia. Kirithess's ears shot straight up. 40,000 years. Your people have been making these marks for 40,000 years. Longer, actually. We've been drawing since before we figured out agriculture. It's one of the things that makes us human. And you've been doing this here? In the palace? For how long? Elena shifted uncomfortably. Since about a month after I arrived. I was going crazy without some way to create that felt real to me. Kirithess looked at the sketch again, then at Elena's hands, then back at the drawing. Show me, she said suddenly. Show you what? How it works. How you make the images appear. Elena hesitated. Kira, if anyone finds out about this. My ears have always been too big for my own good, Kirithess said with a rueful smile. Might as well put them to use keeping secrets. Against her better judgment, Elena found herself explaining the basics of shading, of how pressure affected line weight, of the way artists learn to see negative space and light. Kirithess listened with the intensity of a scholar discovering a new branch of physics, her ears shifting through a rainbow of colors as Elena demonstrated different techniques. It's like you're having a conversation with the paper, Kirithess observed. Each mark responds to the last one. Exactly. You get it. But it's so slow, Kirithess said, though her tone suggested she was beginning to see this as a feature rather than a bug. So, deliberate. Good things take time, Elena said, then paused. That's probably not very Etherean of me to say. No, Kirithess admitted, but maybe that's not entirely bad. They spent the next hour with Elena teaching basic pencil techniques while Kirithess attempted to understand how creation could exist without technology. Her first attempts looked like a seismic readout from a particularly violent earthquake, but her enthusiasm made up for her lack of skill. This is harder than it looks, Kirithess said, frowning at her wobbly attempt to draw a simple circle. Everything worth doing is, Elena replied. That's another 40,000-year-old human truth. As the morning progressed toward midday, they both became aware that Kirithess's duties were going undone and Elena's schedule would soon require her presence at various diplomatic functions. The real world was reasserting itself, threatening to end their strange little bubble of shared discovery. I have to go, Kirithess said reluctantly, gathering her neglected cleaning supplies. But this, what we've shared. It's extraordinary. It's just drawing, Elena said, though her smile suggested she understood the significance of the moment. No, Kirithess said, her ears glowing soft gold with conviction. It's revolution disguised as simplicity. She left Elena's quarters with her mind spinning, carrying the secret of human art like a small sun burning in her chest. Neither woman realized that their forbidden exchange had been the first step in something that would challenge not just palace protocol, but the fundamental assumptions about creation, technology, and what it meant to be truly alive. 3 days after their first encounter, Kirithess had developed what she privately called sketch syndrome, an irresistible urge to see everything in terms of lines and shadows. She found herself studying the curve of bioluminescent vines along the corridor walls, wondering how Elena would capture their gentle glow with nothing but graphite marks. Her oversized ears had taken on a permanent pale pink flush, which her supervisor attributed to the stress of convergence preparations rather than a secret obsession with primitive human art. Kira, you're polishing that same section of wall for the third time, observed Nelera, the senior cleaning coordinator whose ears were so perfectly proportioned they could have been used as architectural models. Are you trying to wear through to the palace's neural core? Sorry, just want everything perfect for the dignitaries, Kirithess replied, though truthfully she'd been imagining how Elena might sketch the wall's organic texture. The bioluminescent patterns reminded her of the careful shading techniques Elena had demonstrated, except these glowed with their own inner light. Well, redirect that perfectionist energy to the guest quarters. Ambassador Krelthos from the Andorian Collective arrives tonight, and apparently they require atmospheric pressure that would crush most carbon-based life forms. The environmental engineers are having nervous breakdowns. Kirithess nodded and gathered her supplies, but her route to the guest quarters happened to pass Elena's chambers. She told herself she was simply being efficient with her time, not desperately hoping for another glimpse of the mysterious human art. The fact that she'd hidden a piece of rough paper in her cleaning kit was purely coincidental. Elena's door was sealed again, which had become her new routine since their encounter. Kirithess lingered in the corridor, pretending to calibrate her bio-scrubber while her ears swiveled toward any sound from within. The soft scratch of pencil on paper had become her favorite music, even though she could barely hear it through the palace's organic walls. Terrible technique, came a familiar voice behind her. If you're going to eavesdrop, at least pretend to be doing something useful. Kirithess spun around to find Elena leaning against the corridor wall, wearing the expression humans called a smirk. Her mysterious ears remained infuriatingly neutral, revealing nothing about her emotional state. I wasn't eavesdropping, Kirithess protested, her ears betraying her with a guilty orange flush. I was, acoustically monitoring for maintenance issues. Is that what we're calling it? Elena pushed off from the wall and approached her door. Well, since you're here for maintenance monitoring, you might as well help me with a technical problem. Elena's quarters had been transformed into what could only be described as a clandestine art studio. Sketches covered every available surface, studies of palace architecture, portraits of Etherean staff, even attempts to capture the way the twin suns painted geometric shadows across the floor. Kirithess felt her ears cycle through several colors as she took in the accumulated evidence of Elena's secret rebellion. You've been busy, she managed. Obsessively so, Elena admitted. Turns out having a captive audience of one very curious Etherean has been remarkably motivating. Look at this. Elena held up a sketch that made Kirithessa's ears flatten with shock. It was a portrait of herself, captured in the moment of wonder when she'd first witnessed human drawing. Elena had somehow managed to convey the complex mixture of emotions that had played across her features: curiosity, confusion, and dawning recognition. Is that really how I looked? Kirithess asked, reaching out to trace the lines with one finger. That's how you look when you're thinking, Elena said. Your ears go through this amazing sequence of colors, and your face gets this expression like you're solving the universe's greatest puzzle. I do not have expressions, Kirithess protested. Etherians communicate through ear position and chromaticity. Facial expressions are primitive emotional displays. Right, Elena said with obvious amusement. And that thing you're doing with your mouth right now? What do you call that? Kirithess touched her lips, realizing she'd been unconsciously smiling. Muscular malfunction. Or maybe your people aren't as different from humans as you think. The comment hung between them, loaded with implications that neither was quite ready to examine. Instead, Elena pulled out a fresh piece of paper and handed Kirithess a pencil. Your turn. Try drawing something simple. Simple like what? Like. Elena looked around the room. That fruit bowl. Start with basic shapes and work from there. Kirithess stared at the bowl as if it had personally offended her. It's just sitting there. How do I make it move onto the paper? It doesn't move. You translate what you see into marks. Think of it as biological data transfer, but instead of using neural interfaces, you're using your hand as the transmission device. That makes no sense whatsoever. Welcome to being human. Half of what we do makes no sense, and the other half is just happy accidents waiting to happen. For the next hour, Elena guided Kirithess through the basics of observational drawing. The Ethereans' first attempts looked like abstract representations of geometric chaos, but gradually something recognizable began to emerge. Her natural curiosity, combined with her oversized ears' sensitivity to spatial relationships, gave her an unexpected advantage in understanding perspective. This is incredibly frustrating, Kirithess said, erasing her fifth attempt at the bowl's elliptical rim. Why can't I just think it into existence? Because then you'd miss the journey, Elena replied. Look, when your people create art through neural interfaces, how long do you spend planning it? Planning? Kirithess looked confused. You simply conceptualize the desired outcome and the technology manifests it. Planning would introduce inefficiency. But what about discovery? What about finding things you didn't know you wanted to create? Kirithess paused, her pencil hovering over the paper. We optimize for intended results. Unintended outcomes are considered errors. And there's your problem. Some of the best human art comes from errors, accidents, and things we stumbled into while trying to do something else. We call it happy accidents, remember? Happy accidents, Kirithess repeated, then deliberately made a bold, imperfect line across her drawing. Instead of ruining it, the mark somehow brought the bowl to life, giving it weight and shadow. Her ears flushed bright gold with excitement. It worked. See? Sometimes the best discoveries come from embracing the things that go wrong. Their artistic collaboration was interrupted by the soft chime of Elena's communication panel. Vextellone's melodious voice filled the room, causing both women to freeze like guilty children caught raiding a cookie jar. Dr. Vasquez, your presence is requested in the diplomatic reception hall. The Corvin advance team has arrived ahead of schedule and wishes to conduct preliminary observations. Elena's face went pale. Observations, in Corvin culture typically involve detailed biological scans and behavioral analysis. She'd heard rumors about their specimen collection practices that made her stomach turn. Acknowledged, she called back, her voice steady despite her obvious terror. I'll be there shortly. Preliminary observations? Kirithess asked, her ears shifting to a worried purple. The Corvins like to study things before they acquire them, Elena said grimly. I'm apparently this season's most interesting cultural artifact. But you're not an artifact, you're a person. Try explaining that to beings who classify sentient species by their usefulness in controlled environments. Kirithess stood up abruptly, her cleaning supplies scattering across the floor. This is wrong. You shouldn't have to perform for beings who see you as a specimen. Welcome to interstellar diplomacy, Elena said, gathering her sketches and hiding them in their secret compartment. Where cultural exchange is just a polite term for civilized kidnapping. There has to be something we can do. Elena paused in her hiding activities, struck by Kirithess's use of we. In the 2 years she'd been on Zephyria Prime, no one had ever included themselves in her problems. She'd been a curiosity, a guest, a diplomatic responsibility, but never someone worth standing with. We? She asked quietly. Kirithess's ears flushed deep pink with embarrassment and determination. I mean, someone should do something. Hypothetically speaking. Hypothetically, Elena agreed, though her expression had softened considerably. As Elena prepared to face the Corvin advance team, Kirithess found herself making a decision that would have horrified her supervisors. She was going to attend the diplomatic reception, not as assigned staff, but as an observer. Someone needed to witness what the Corvins were planning, and her oversized ears had always been excellent at picking up conversations others missed. Elena, she called as the human reached the door. Yes. Remember what you said about happy accidents? Sometimes the best discoveries come from things that seem wrong at first. Elena smiled, understanding the implication. Are you planning to have a happy accident, Kira? The happiest, Kirithess replied, her ears glowing with mischievous determination. As Elena left for her appointment with potential captivity, Kirithess began planning her own small rebellion. If the Corvins wanted to observe human behavior, she'd make sure they got a show worth watching. After all, she'd learned from the best teacher in the galaxy that sometimes the most primitive approaches yielded the most revolutionary results. The question was whether her newfound appreciation for happy accidents would be enough to save her friend from becoming a permanent resident of someone else's specimen collection. The Great Hall of Zephyria Prime had been transformed into a showcase of galactic diplomacy, with beings from 17 different worlds gathered to witness the celestial convergence ceremonies. Elena stood on the presentation platform, wearing her most diplomatic smile while internally calculating the odds of survival if she made a run for the bio gardens. The Corvin delegation occupied the front row, their metallic exoskeletons gleaming under the hall's bioluminescent lighting, recording devices whirring softly as they documented her every movement. And now, announced Vextalone, his elegant ears practically vibrating with ceremony, Dr. Elena Vasquez will demonstrate the fascinating primitive behaviors that characterize her species. Elena stepped forward, her hidden art supplies tucked beneath her ceremonial robes like weapons in a very polite war. She'd made her decision during the sleepless night before the ceremony. If the Corvins wanted to see primitive human behavior, she'd give them something truly revolutionary. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying across the hall, today I'd like to share with you an ancient human tradition that predates our space travel, our computers, and even our written language. The crowd murmured with interest, ears of various shapes and sizes perking up throughout the audience. Elena spotted Kirithess near the back, her oversized ears flushed with nervous anticipation. We call it drawing, Elena continued, pulling out her paper and pencil with the flourish of a magician revealing their greatest trick. It's the art of making reality appear through nothing but intention, observation, and patience. A ripple of confusion passed through the gathered dignitaries. Several Etherian officials looked genuinely horrified, as if Elena had announced her intention to perform surgery with a sharpened stick. Fascinating, rumbled the lead Corvin delegate, Commander Thex Quinn, whose voice sounded like gravel being processed through a mechanical throat. A pre-technological creative method. How delightfully primitive. Primitive, yes, Elena agreed cheerfully, settling cross-legged on the platform in a decidedly undignified pose. But also revolutionary. You see, this method requires something your advanced technologies cannot provide: time, patience, and the willingness to make mistakes. She began to sketch, her pencil moving in confident strokes across the paper. The hall fell silent except for the soft scratch of graphite and the gentle hum of the palace's biosystems. Elena had chosen her subject carefully, the gathered delegates themselves, captured in their moment of rapt attention. The human creates images without technological interface, observed Dr. Zyll from the Crystalline Collective, her translucent form shimmering with curiosity. How is consciousness transferred to matter without neural bridging? It isn't, Elena replied, continuing to sketch. That's the point. The consciousness doesn't transfer, it translates. Every mark is a decision, every line a conversation between what I see and what I choose to show. Commander Thexquin leaned forward, his recording devices humming louder. The efficiency ratio appears catastrophically low. How many images can be produced per standard time unit? Wrong question, Elena said with a grin that would have made her diplomatic handlers weep. The question is, how much discovery happens during the creation process? How many happy accidents lead to unexpected beauty? Happy accidents are inefficient, Thexquin stated flatly. Happy accidents are human, Elena countered, deliberately smudging a line to create an effect she hadn't planned. They're also the source of our greatest innovations. We didn't reach the stars because we were efficient. We reached them because we were willing to fail spectacularly until we succeeded accidentally. In the back of the hall, Kirithess felt her ears cycling through colors as she watched Elena essentially perform diplomatic suicide by pencil. This was either the bravest or most foolish thing she'd ever witnessed, and she couldn't decide which possibility terrified her more. Vextellone's ears had gone completely silver with diplomatic panic. Dr. Vasquez, perhaps we should demonstrate more conventional human behaviors. This is conventional, Elena replied, adding detail to her sketch of the crystalline delegate's light refractive properties. Humans have been drawing for 40,000 years. We drew before we farmed, before we built cities, before we figured out that pointing sharp sticks at mammoths was a viable hunting strategy. 40,000 years of inefficiency, Commander Thexquin mused. Remarkable that your species survived such technological stagnation. We didn't just survive, Elena said, her pencil dancing across the paper. We thrived. And do you know why? The hall waited in expectant silence. Because sometimes the longest path to a destination teaches you things about the journey that the shortcuts miss. Because sometimes the process is more valuable than the product. And because sometimes, she held up her completed sketch, which somehow captured not just the physical appearance of the gathered delegates but something essential about their character, their curiosity, their fundamental dignity as beings. The primitive approach reveals truths that advanced technology overlooks. The sketch passed from hand to appendage to energy field throughout the hall, generating murmurs of amazement from beings who hadn't realized they could be moved by arrangements of simple lines. How did you capture our essence patterns? Dr. Zyll asked, her crystalline structure resonating with what might have been wonder. Our bioartists require sophisticated neural mapping to achieve similar emotional resonance. I looked, Elena said simply. Really looked. Not scanned, not analyzed, not processed through algorithms. I sat with the uncertainty of not knowing what would emerge and let my hand discover what my eyes were seeing. Commander Thexquin studied the sketch with the intensity of a being re-evaluating fundamental assumptions. The technique requires no external technology. None. Just observation, practice, and acceptance that most attempts will be terrible. And the learning curve? Terrible for years. Then gradually less terrible. Then occasionally wonderful. Inefficient, the commander concluded, but his tone had shifted from dismissive to thoughtful. Spectacularly so, Elena agreed. But efficiency isn't the point. Growth is. Discovery is. Connection is. She pulled out another piece of paper and extended it toward Kirithess. Would anyone like to try? The hall erupted in a chaos of diplomatic protocol as various delegates realized they were being invited to participate in primitive technology demonstration. Kirithess stepped forward, her ears blazing with courage and terror in equal measure. "I'll try," she announced, loud enough for her voice to carry to the horrified senior staff. As Kirithess took the pencil with hands that shook slightly, Elena realized something profound had happened. She was no longer performing for the delegates, she was teaching them. The difference was everything. "Start with simple shapes," Elena guided gently. "Don't worry about making it perfect. Worry about making it real." For the next hour, something unprecedented occurred in the great hall of Zephyria Prime. Beings from across the galaxy sat on the floor, making marks on paper, laughing at their mistakes, and discovering that creation could exist without perfection. Commander Thexquin's first attempt at drawing looked like a seismic readout, but his second showed definite improvement. Dr. Zyll created crystalline geometric patterns that were actually quite beautiful in their mathematical precision. Vextelone, meanwhile, had quietly retreated to update his diplomatic incident reports. Dr. Vasquez, Commander Thexquin said as the session wound down, the Corvin Collective would like to extend an invitation for cultural exchange. Elena's heart stopped. "Exchange? We would like to send a delegation to learn these primitive techniques. In return, we offer our advanced bioneural creative technologies for study by your people." "That's not quite the same as specimen collection," Elena said carefully. "Specimen collection is for inferior species," Thexquin replied with what might have been dignity. "Artists, even primitive ones, deserve collaborative respect." As the delegates dispersed, chattering excitedly about their introduction to human drawing, Elena found herself alone with Kirithess on the presentation platform. The Etherean's ears had settled into a warm gold that suggested contentment mixed with exhaustion. "That was either brilliant or completely insane," Kirithess said, looking at her own sketch, a surprisingly good rendition of the palace's organic architecture. "Why not both?" Elena replied. "Some of the best human achievements start with someone being told their idea is crazy. Is that what happened here? Did we just accidentally start an interstellar art revolution?" Elena looked around the hall, where several delegates were still examining their drawings with the intensity of scientists studying new species. "I think we might have. Though I suspect the real revolution isn't about art techniques." "What's it about then?" "About remembering that efficiency isn't everything. That sometimes the longest path teaches you the most. That mistakes can be beautiful. That being primitive doesn't mean being inferior, sometimes it means being essential." Kirithess nodded, understanding. "And that friendship can happen between the most unlikely people." "That too," Elena agreed. "Especially that." As they gathered the scattered art supplies, Elena realized something had fundamentally changed. She was no longer a curiosity, a specimen, or even a diplomatic guest. She had become something more valuable, a teacher, a bridge between worlds, a reminder that the old ways sometimes held truths that advanced civilizations had forgotten. "Elena," Kirithess said as they prepared to leave the hall, "what happens now?" Elena looked at her friend, her true friend, the first she'd made in this strange corner of the galaxy, and smiled. "Now we keep drawing. We keep making mistakes. We keep discovering that the most primitive approaches sometimes yield the most profound results." "And the convergence? The diplomatic obligations? Will continue, but on different terms. I think today proved that humans have something to contribute beyond entertainment value." As they walked through the palace corridors, past walls that hummed with bioluminescent approval, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced since arriving on Zephyria Prime, genuine hope. Not hope for escape, but hope for belonging. For contribution. For the possibility that being stranded in paradise might actually be the beginning of something wonderful rather than the end of something familiar. Behind them, in the great hall, several alien dignitaries continued to practice their newfound art, filling pages with imperfect but heartfelt attempts to capture beauty through the ancient human magic of putting pencil to paper. The revolution had begun, one happy accident at a time.